Hey guys, welcome back to ClipMonk. I am just blown away by the response to the first video. Thank you to everybody who watched, liked, subbed, and who commented such nice things. Alright, in today's video I'm going to be talking about dealing with life's misfortunes. The inspiration for this video came from listening to the book A Short History of Nearly Everything by Bryson. In this book, Bryson covers the history of scientific developments in many domains like chemistry, paleontology, geology, astronomy, and particle physics. He also talks about the interactions between different scientists that led to those theories. I find it exciting to learn about the lives and character of different scientists, their beefs and rivalries, and some unexpected experimental results that led to progress in a seemingly unrelated field. I was struck by the stories of two figures in this book, Gideon Mantell and Max Planck. They both made very important discoveries in their respective fields, and both seemed to have a cloud of bad luck raining down on them for periods of their lives. I want to talk about their stories for two reasons. First, because they're fascinating, and second, because I think they can teach us some life lessons about perseverance, character, and meaning. In studying the lives of Mantell and Planck, I was reminded of the psychologist Viktor Frankl, who also faced a great deal of tragedy in his life. In the last portion of the video, I will highlight some key points from his writings about the inevitability of suffering, how we have control over our perception and framing of events, and ways of finding meaning in life. Okay, let's talk about Gideon Algernon Mantell, a doctor and amateur paleontologist in the early 1800s. We're going to jump into 1822, when his wife collected an odd brown stone-like object on a walk and brought it back to him. After examining and studying the object, Mantell concluded that it was the fossilized tooth of an herbivorous dinosaur from the Cretaceous period, which would later be named the iguanodon. This was a monumental claim considering that the word dinosaur didn't even exist yet, and in fact would later be coined by Richard Owen in 1841. This name and year are significant to Mantell's story, as we'll see later. When Mantell told his geologist friend William Buckland about the fossil and its origins, Buckland advised him to carefully verify his claims. Mantell listened to this advice and spent 3 years researching and collecting evidence to support his conclusion. Sadly, before Mantell was able to publish his official report on the iguanodon, Buckland happened to discover the fossilized remains of a different dinosaur, the Megalosaurus, and published his report first. Buckland didn't even realize he had discovered a new type of animal, yet he was credited with the first discovery of a dinosaur. Mantell devoted a lot of his time and energy to paleontology, which was an unprofitable decision. Practicing medicine went on the back burner while he filled his house with fossils and went 300 Great British pounds into debt trying to publish books on his findings. Side note, 300 pounds in 1827 is estimated to be worth 26,642.16 pounds today, or just under 35,000 US dollars. Mantell was eager to make some money back, and he thought it would be a good idea to turn his house into a paleontology museum. Upon later consideration, though, he thought that charging admission would damage his reputation, so he let hundreds of people visit his home every week for free. This interfered badly with his home life, of course, and interrupted his doctorly duties. This was simply too much for his family to deal with, and eventually his wife left him and took the kids with her. I wonder what Mantell was thinking at this stage, after going into book publishing debt, hoarding fossils, turning his house into a free museum, and then selling everything to get out of debt. It's possible he was relieved, like, finally, my nagging wife and kids are off my back and I can fully focus on what's important in life. dinosaur bones. Or maybe he was thinking, she just doesn't see the vision. I'm going to make some more breakthrough discoveries about dinosaurs, and then we're going to ascend the social ladder of 1800s England. I just need some time. Whatever Mantell happened to be thinking at this point, I can assure you it did not match up with his actual fate. Now I have to talk about Richard Owen, a proper villain of the early paleontology scene. He was a talented doctor and anatomist, which he demonstrated early in his career when he helped the Royal College of Surgeons organize a vast collection of medical specimens. He was an expert on animal anatomy and reconstruction and produced hundreds of papers in that domain. As I said earlier, he coined the word dinosaur, and he also invented the concept of publicly accessible museums. This all sounds very impressive, so why have I characterized him as the bad guy in this story? Owen repeatedly used his status and influence to cheat and deceive others. He would invent credentials to get published, take credit for others' discoveries, steal their specimens, and blackball potential up-and-coming scientists who were poised to outshine him. In 1841, Mantell was severely injured in a horse carriage accident, somehow falling out and getting dragged behind it, resulting in severe spinal damage and chronic pain for the rest of his life. Upon learning this, Richard Owen pounced on the opportunity to rewrite history in his favor, removing Mantell's contributions to paleontology, renaming species, and purporting to have discovered them himself. Although Mantell continued to submit research for publication, Owen influenced the rejection of those papers as well. Alright, this particular detail of Mantell's life is so poetically unjust, I'm going to have to quote the author, Bill Bryson. In 1852, unable to bear any more pain or persecution, Mantell took his own life. His deformed spine was removed and sent to the Royal College of Surgeons where, and here's an irony for you, it was placed in the care of Richard Owen, director of the college's Hunterian Museum. It's so unbelievably sad I reflexively want to laugh, but I will not. Shockingly, taking the man's spine wasn't enough. The villainous valor stealer, Richard Owen, couldn't resist tormenting him one last time after he passed. And in Gideon Mantell's publicly circulated obituary, he called him a mediocre anatomist and discredited him as the discoverer of the iguanodon. I think Mantell's life story is very tragic. I think that we all ought to be able to pursue our passions and find a fulfilling calling in life, which in his case was paleontology. In an ideal world, he would have been able to support himself and his family from the discoveries and contributions he made to the field. Sadly, due to mythological levels of bad luck and the conniving schemes of Richard Owen, he was unsuccessful. However, some of his problems seem self-inflicted, like the book debt and museum fiasco. He made some risky bets that didn't pay off, and aside from the money, it cost him his family. But I don't wish to add insult to spinal injury in commenting on Mantell's life. I admire the fact that Mantell continued to contribute to the field of paleontology for over a decade after his accident, in spite of Owen cheating him repeatedly. For me, his story serves as a cautionary tale of taking risks at the expense of providing for yourself and others. I'll revisit Mantell a bit at the end of the video, but for now, we're going to turn our attention to Max Planck. Planck was a German theoretical physicist who lived from 1858 to 1947. Planck was talented across many domains, from math and physics to language, philosophy, and music. He decided to study physics because he felt that was the discipline in which he could make significant original contributions. He was actually discouraged from pursuing physics because he was told that there were no more big discoveries to be made in that field. As it turned out, however, his work on blackbody radiation and the discovery of a mathematical constant would lay the foundation for a new branch of physics known as quantum theory. I'm going to try and relate the significance of Planck's findings, but please bear with me because I am not a physicist. Planck and his contemporaries were trying to describe the energy distribution of a black body, which is a perfect emitter and absorber of radiation. There were some existing theories about this energy distribution, but they did not perfectly match experimental observations, suggesting that the theories were incomplete. In revising these theories and constructing an equation which matched experimental evidence, Planck had to assume that the oscillators comprising the black body and re-emitting the radiant energy incident upon them could not absorb this energy continuously, but only in discrete amounts in quanta of energy. This, along with other observations, led to the realization that subatomic phenomena cannot be described by ordinary Newtonian physics. Planck's concept of energy quanta, in other words, conflicted fundamentally with all past physical theory. He was, as one historian put it, a reluctant revolutionary. This level of intellect is astounding to me. Like, I'm comparing it to myself doing homework, and I'm trying to solve a math problem. I get my answer, and I check the back of the book and find a different answer. And my course of action is to go find a friend or the teacher and ask them how to get the book answer. Imagine being Max Planck and you get that energy is not emitting or absorbing continuously, and you think, oh, the equation's wrong. The physical theory is wrong. Energy is absorbed in quanta. Basically, I'm trying to highlight this guy's next level genius. All right, so this guy's a genius. He's talented in a bunch of different fields. Where's the tragedy? Well, from 1914 to 1928, Planck convinced some of the brightest scientists of the time to come to Germany and progress the field of theoretical physics. Unfortunately, as Planck was trying to elevate physics in Germany, a certain political leader, typically synonymous with pure evil, was rising to power. This was detrimental to German academia and society at large. Planck was outraged at Hitler's treatment of the Jewish people and actually scheduled a meeting with him to try and reverse the vile policies. Although he failed to change Hitler's mind, turns out he was pretty difficult to reason with, Planck stayed in Germany during World War II to try and maintain the state of physics research there. Again, I'm just astounded by this reaction from Planck. Today, we talk about Hitler as the devil on earth, and Planck scheduled a meeting with him and said, I don't approve of what you're doing. Planck was revered as a great leader of universities and organizations. He was fair, wise, and had integrity and conviction. This is further evidenced by his ability to withstand the trials that would fill his later years. At age 51, his wife passed away, and over the next 10 years, 3 of his 4 children passed away. In 1944, Planck's house in Berlin was destroyed by bombs, and in 1945, the Gestapo secret state police killed his last remaining son because he was implicated in an assassination attempt on Hitler. Remarkably, after all of this, Planck accepted the reappointment to president of the Kaiser Wilhelm Society at age 87, where after World War II, he was able to help rebuild German science programs. I find Planck's resilience to be really inspiring, especially at the end of his life. It would be really tempting for anybody in his position at age 87 to say, look, I already reinvented subatomic physics, and I lost my whole family during World War II, so I will respectfully pass the torch on rebuilding German science programs. But he continued to make a meaningful contribution to the world until his dying day. Speaking of contributing meaning, I'd like to talk about Viktor Frankl now. Viktor Frankl, who lived from 1905 to 1997, was a psychiatrist, neurologist, author, and Holocaust survivor. Being a prominent psychology student from Vienna, Austria, he actually corresponded with two extremely influential figures from the field, Sigmund Freud and Alfred Adler. He recognized the significance of their work, but would later formulate his own psychological theory called logotherapy, which is Greek for healing through meaning. He spent much of his career treating suicidal patients, trying to both help them and learn from them. As a result of the Nazi invasion of Austria, Frankl and his family were forced into concentration camps. During this period, he lost his father, his mother, his brother, and his wife. Even in these conditions, Frankl continued to work with suicidal individuals and tried to help new prisoners adjust to their awful surroundings. After being released, Frankl published A Psychologist Experiences the Concentration Camp, which would later be titled Man's Search for Meaning in the US. This book was an international bestseller, which indicated to Frankl that meaninglessness was a serious problem in the world. Frankl coined the term existential vacuum to describe the void of meaninglessness that was being experienced by so many people. He believed that the mechanistic institutional systems developed in the 20th century, governments, schools, corporations, etc., contributed to the existential vacuum. I feel like his take is pretty spot on. When you go through the public education system in the US, you're encouraged to study and work hard to get into a good college so that you can prepare to get a good job and contribute back to society. I think in a lot of cases, though, people are jumping through hoops in the education system, landing an okay job at the end, and they wind up feeling more like units of labor than a person making a meaningful contribution to the world. In this slide, I want to share some points from Frankl's psychological theory. Suffering is an inevitable part of the human condition, and while we can't choose the circumstances that we're in, we can choose how we react to it. We can learn from our mistakes. We can reframe the events of our life in a more helpful way. We can stand up for the things we believe to be right, and we can look for opportunities to help others so that we don't obsess over our own problems. Finally, he says meaning can be found through creations, or what we put out into the world, experiences, or what we take from the world, and attitude, how we view the world. I like Frankl's emphasis on attitude and perception. I regularly delude myself that I'll be happy after I finish this project, or after I buy this thing, or after I exit this uncomfortable situation. But in reality, events or possessions aren't what make you happy or unhappy. It's just how you're reacting to those things. Here's the part where I sneak in some Buddhism. Here's some quotes from the heart of Buddhist meditation. Mind precedes things, dominates them, creates them. Through mind alone are we aware of the so-called external world, including our own body. Mind is the fount of all the good and evil that arises within and befalls us from without. I agree with all these statements, and I feel like there's great merit to developing control over your perception and attitude. With all this talk about finding meaning and controlling your perceptions, I want to make it clear that this is not a veiled jab at Gideon Mantell. I would like to read this line from our friend Viktor Frankl. No man should judge unless he asks himself in absolute honesty whether in a similar situation he might not have done the same. Looking at Mantell through this lens, if you had an arch nemesis undoing all your hard work for a decade, which you accomplished in spite of chronic, crippling back pain, I think you're allowed to throw in the towel at that point. I'm not condoning it, but I'm not condemning it.
But it looks like he may commit suicide. Suicide is badass.
No.
My main point in making this video is a reminder to appreciate life, to keep persevering in the face of difficulty, and find a way to create some good in the world. I wish to emulate the work ethic and resilience of Planck and Frankl, and if nothing else, recognize that I have the good fortune not to have Richard Owen or Adolf Hitler ruining everything I've ever worked for. So there's no more excuse for self-pity. One last point I discovered while reading about these guys. Apparently both Max Planck and Viktor Frankl were avid rock climbers. So I'm just going to go out on a limb and suggest that that had to do with their psychological well-being somehow. I don't think it guarantees the conception of genius theories, but if you find a form of exercise that you genuinely enjoy and your brain just enters flow state, I feel like that has immense benefits. I mean, doctors are allowed to prescribe medicines that may or may not have side effects, so I'm allowing myself to prescribe exercise. Don't go overkill and like bench too much and blow out a rotator cuff or squat too heavy and like fall and break a bunch of stuff, but go and find what exercises you like to do, build up a routine, and then when you accomplish that in like an automatic fashion, you just feel better every day. All right, this is getting a little preachy, so Clip Monk signing off.